What up everybody, Nerdycore, back out with another video, and this one's going to be another edition of my top 100 games of all time. I appreciate everybody who watched the other two ones and is coming into this one. Also appreciate if this is your first one you're seeing, and you want to see more, I will link the other two in the description below. As for the rules of the series, I'm only allowing 2 of each game franchise on there, so it's not littered with so many of the same games. I also don't go past anything earlier than the PS1. I didn't really play those games too much, and I'm not as old school as a retro gamer as some other people, so my list will be PS1 to current consoles. Also, it will include PC games. I'm not as big as a PC single player game fan, but I do play some multiplayer games on the PC a good bit, so some of those games will be included as well. And for each game, I'll just give a brief description of the game and why it makes the list for me. Either be nostalgia reasons, how good the game is, or a mix of both. And once again, these will be the video games from the 49th position to the 40th, so it will end on the 40th. Once again, thanks for watching, and let's just get right into it. Alright, so coming in at 59 is South Park: The Stick of Truth. What this game is it's a turn-based RPG based in the South Park universe. For those of you who don't know about South Park or haven't watched it yourself, it's basically a over-the-top, really crude and dark humor comedy based on the lives of 4, I think there's third graders at the beginning, then they go to the 4th grade, and I think they eventually make it to the 5th grade, but 4 kids that takes place in a Colorado town called South Park, and kind of follows all their misadventures, I would say, that they get on. For me, I'm a huge fan of the show, so when I heard there was games coming out and I heard that they were actually pretty good, I really rushed to pick this one up, and I definitely do not regret making that decision. What I love so much about this game is what they do so well is nail the atmosphere, the look, the sound, and the story design of an actual South Park episode. So it feels like you're playing like a long, I don't know, I think the game is like 13, 15, or 20 hours, something like that. One big long episode, like a special type thing, back to back to back. The art style and the graphics really lend itself to video games insanely well, so the game looks exactly like the show looks, so it gives that authentic feeling to the game. Also, another thing, a lot of other games in this genre, like the comedy TV spin-off genre, or like just spin-off genre in general, it nails the writing and the jokes land just as good as the show. So if you're a fan of even just the comedy and you're not a huge fan of the turn-based aspects, this game will carry itself based on how funny it is and how much it is like the show. The combat itself is actually pretty good. I'm not a huge turn-based gamer myself, but I do enjoy the occasional games like Persona and this one with the turn-based combat if it's good enough. This one was good enough that it was fun. It was a little repetitive, as most turn-based games are, I find, but it was fun enough. The moves had little gags with them, so it was an interesting learning all the different skills just to see like how it interacts with other people. The boss fights were pretty interesting, and the story actually has 2 multiple paths you can go on, so there is replayability to the game, which is great. But as I said, what made this game make it to my list and what I enjoyed so much about it was just how much it felt like an extension of the show, and a show I love personally, so that's why I made the list. Alright, next up is Twisted Metal Head-On. As I've stated in my other videos, my PSP is broken at the moment and I can't get it to charge, so all the gameplay footage for these games on the PSP will have a substitute. In this case, it's a game that makes my top 10 worst PS3 games, which is the Twisted Metal for the PS3, but it's the only other Twisted Metal game I own physically that I could record on. But it kind of nails the general feel of all the other Twisted Metal games, so I can kind of talk about what makes this one better and why this one makes my list. So Twisted Metal Head-On, I've only played on the PSP, and I really enjoyed it. What these games are basically, I don't know, Crash Up Derby on steroids. Basically, you pick one of your characters. What this game does way better than the game I'm showing you here is it has, I'm gonna say 15-ish different characters that all have their different vehicles, each having their unique theme and special abilities that only work with their specific character. and you jump into a game either through the story mode, which is kind of like a little arcade ladder, which each person has their own little story and their unique ending once you beat it, or you can hop into a versus match, and it's just basically you drop in, there's a big giant battle arena with power-ups and weapons you can find. It's kind of like Mario Kart, where they're kind of just floating everywhere and you run over them, and that gives you the perk. But instead, there are basically all weapons, and they're all just made to launch at people in a circle and try to blow them up. That's the point of the game, to be the last one standing. It's also accompanied by some really good mood-setting music in terms of like the high-octane like action that these games provide. And what I enjoyed so much about this game in particular out of the series is I enjoyed the arcade ladders. I love games like fighting games, and this game where there's a nice little arcade ladder where I can go through, play a couple of normal matches, get up to the boss matches, have a couple of boss matches which are unique and fun, and then I get a little ending for the character, and then I can load into a different character, have a different play style, go through the same stories, get to the boss, do the boss with the new play style, get their ending, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. I really enjoy that, and this game fills that niche for me. It's also just a ton of fun to play, and probably the best PSP game I own that I can just pick up and play and just have some fun with it. And it's such a well-known franchise for the PlayStation for a good reason. Alright, coming up next at 57 is StarCraft 2. It's not specifically the Wings of Liberty expansion. I only have this one and the Zerg one. I haven't bought the Protoss one yet. But the one I mainly played was Wings of Liberty. But in general, it's the same game, just different expansions for stories. This is the first one, and the one I personally put my most time into. What StarCraft 2 is, for those people that haven't played it, it's a RTS, one of the games that originally kind of popularized the genre in terms of giving it that next leap to grab more of a mass audience with it, right alongside with World of Warcraft and Command & Conquer. What specifically sets this apart, and why it's probably my favorite RTS of all time, is it's one of those RTSs that feels so smooth to play, and the campaigns are fun, they're really fleshed out, there's progress that you make throughout the game in terms of you can level up certain units, give them certain boosts throughout researching them, throughout the entire story, they'll save over, you can make choices on which upgrades you want to give to units, so it kind of builds your own unique playstyle through each playthrough. There's a bunch of different side missions on top of the main missions within them, so you can kind of challenge yourself by trying to complete those as well. As I said before, the troop movements, the ability to give orders and kind of micromanage is very well done in this game. It's really smooth, and with having a good computer to play this on, it's really well optimized and just feels fantastic to play. And even if you're not looking to get into the multiplayer, which I played a little bit when it initially came out, I didn't play too much after. If you just want to play the main story, it's a good amount of content and it's really well done and a lot of fun. There's now 3 stories you can get with different expansion packs, and they're all probably around the 15 to 20 hour mark if you're playing at a fast clip. And through those 15 to 20 hours, each faction plays really different, and you'll get a really big feel of having to master different play styles in order to complete these campaigns, especially if you play them on harder difficulties where it actually gives you a challenge. And the other thing that's so great about this game, specifically for me, is I really got into, not really the multiplayer, but I got into the arcade games. What I mean by that is there's a subsection of the multiplayer. It's like an arcade tab, and it has custom-made games that people made through the map editor and game editor in the actual game. So some of the ones I got into, Phantom Mode, where basically everybody spawns in like a big multiplayer game. It has like 12 people. 2 people are phantoms, so they get extra income, extra gold, and are able to expand a lot quicker. But they're 2 working together, and there's 8 other people trying to figure out who the other 2 are and eliminate them before they get too big that they can just take on everybody. I also played Mafia, which is a version of the card game on the game itself, which is a lot of fun and makes it honestly a little easier to play. And they had this Risk game mode, which is like a real-time strategy version of Risk, which was a lot of fun to play. And there's so many other different ones that I could touch on, but those are just 3 I can name off the top of my head. Overall, this game just has so much content, especially if you want to pick it up now for how much value it is. It's just one that you can always go back and start a new campaign run and just have hours of fun playing it. There's still people playing the arcades at this moment because it's now free. The Wings of Liberty version is free. So it's just one of those ones I can always find myself going back and having some fun. And I played this a ton when I first got my laptop, so that's why it makes my list for me. Alright, next up we have Doom, specifically the modern adaptation of Doom. It's the only one I've played personally, which I know is probably a sin to most people watching this video, but it's my introduction to the Doom franchise. And as a fan of first-person shooters, this is one, in terms of the modern era first-person shooters I've played, that really the combat itself gripped me the most about the game. It was the main reason I got addicted to playing this game and beat it from start to finish really quickly. With most other modern shooters, usually it's a story or some sort of RPG elements tied into it, or the characters or something like that that has to be there in order to keep me interested. This one was just pure combat, music, and just feeling like a badass. Basically, why I enjoyed this game so much is you're playing as a guy known, I think, just specifically as Doomslayer, and a bunch of demons spawn. I don't really know the story. It's basically just bad guys. You're badass. You go in, you kill the bad guys. But basically, you go around shooting a bunch of people, blowing up a bunch of stuff, ripping off people's heads, and slamming people into the ground, butting them with everything, using a chainsaw, revving it through people. It's just super gory, super fast paced, and just a whole lot of fun. Another thing this game does so well with the combat is it's actually quite challenging if you're out of rhythm. I find if you can get into a good rhythm, because it's such a fast paced and floaty shooter that you kind of move from platform to platform, shooting, collecting ammo, quickly rotating, mealing people for kills. You have to kind of plan out your routes on how you're going to tackle each room of enemies. So it's one that, yeah, it's run and gun and shoot them and fun, but it also requires some brain work to figure out how to like optimally beat each room. As I touched on, the music is fantastic in this game. Again, really adds to the atmosphere of the game and gets you going and gets you want to just go in there and shoot all the demons. It really just adds to the game so much. It's one of those games where the music is such a key part and the sound design is such a key part to nailing how much of a badass and how cool you feel doing all this stuff in the game. Also, I played a little bit of the multiplayer. It's fun. It reminds me of the Unreal tournament games, and it was fun to play occasionally. I didn't play it too much, but just wanted to touch on that. Overall, just a really fun game. One of the better playthroughs I played through on the PS4, and was one of those games I just picked up, fell in love with the blind playthrough, didn't really know much about the series, and then just swing through it really quick. I still haven't picked up the second one just because it hasn't dropped in price too much, so I'm trying to wait to find it for a good price. Alright, so coming at number 55, one that I'm sure literally everybody watching this will know, for a good reason. It's one of the top selling games of all time. Might actually be the top selling. It's either this or Tetris, I'm pretty sure. But it's Minecraft. For those of you that somehow don't know what Minecraft is, basically it's like virtual Legos almost. You play as this guy, Steve, who just gets dropped down into the middle of nowhere. You spawn in a random generated seed of this world that can be endless. This is the PS4 copy, so it's not endless on here. But I mainly play it on the PC, so you have this endless world of randomly generated biomes of just pure stuff to explore and do whatever you want with it. So the two main factors of this game, one is the building, so you can kind of put blocks together and build, I don't know, castles, taverns, skyscrapers, rockets that don't work, but they're there and look like them. But it's basically one of those games that it's up to what you want to do and what you want to build that dictates how you play this game. There's also a kind of objective part of it where your goal is to find and kill the end dragon. I've done it once. It's not really why I play the game. How I play this game personally is I basically just mine stuff to build stuff with, and then just go around building. I view this game honestly as basically virtual Legos, as I said, I basically just go around building a bunch of stuff, log in occasionally, build a new thing, be like, alright, that's good for now, go do something else, and just always coming back to it and always building something new. This game is the ultimate time killer game, or the ultimate in-between game. So like, say I just got done playing an annoying game of League, because League is one of the more annoying and frustrating games I've played. And I'm like, alright, what do I want to do in between just to calm myself down and just have some fun? Pop in Minecraft, mine a little bit, get my frustrations away, build a little, building or hut, or like a fishing hut or something like that, and be like, alright, that was fun, and go back to do something else. It's always that game that's there whenever you're pissed off at other games. It's just so relaxing, a lot of fun, and I love the creative element of just building and just messing around with the stuff you build. It's really fun, and always going back and being able to expand on that same world you've been building since, I started playing this, probably the second year it was out, so whenever that was to now, and just slowly being able to add on to the worlds you made is really cool, and it's fun seeing it. So that is why it makes a list for me. Alright, after that we have Dragon Age 2. This is a BioWare RPG. It's part of a series of 3 games, and in my opinion, this is the second best out of the series. But what this game is, for those of you who don't know it, it's kind of a medieval fantasy RPG, and it's kind of, I'll describe it as almost, if any of you know the Knights of the Old Republic combat style, where it's kind of like you load up attacks, you move to your position, and then there's a time delay on the inputs of your attack. It's almost like turn-based combat, but real-time turn-based is how I could describe it. It's very similar to that, but in the second game they decided to go a little different route. It kind of goes for more of a hack and slash game, with those timers on their abilities and the mana being kind of the factors that dictate which abilities you're allowed to use in certain times, and how many of them are you allowed to combo together. So it's kind of a mix of a full hack and slash game and the original kind of slowed down, almost turn-based combat. So what these games do so well is make you fall in love with the cast of characters that you're working with. In this case, the characters are really well done. There's a good overarching story. There's a big town that you're able to explore, and a city you're able to explore. You have your little hub area, and it's just one of those games that gets you so hooked into the story and the development of all your party members. Doing multiple playthroughs where you go through as the obviously good guy character, a neutral character, and an evil character, and bringing along different companions and different makeups of your builds in order to see how different characters react to each situation and the choices you make, which each character will react completely different depending on which type of choices you make throughout the game. So there's always a ton of replayability in these games. And personally for me, I really love the story in this game and the characters in this game. I know people say it's weaker than the first game, and I agree the characters and story are weaker in this game. But I still think they're insanely strong, especially for an RPG from this era. I think they were really well done. Overall, just a fantastic RPG that I really enjoy the characters of, and it's honestly one of my biggest things in games, specifically RPGs. If I can fall in love with the characters and really want to see their growth through the entire game, I'll stick out a game no matter how bad the combat is, no matter how bad the actual overarching story is. Character development and seeing the growth of characters and how they interact together, and going through multiple playthroughs to see each character interact with each element of the game is one thing that really gets me going in gaming, and one thing I really love, and this game does it fantastic. Alright, so coming in at number 53 is another recent game, and that's Far Cry 5. I know a lot of people prefer Far Cry 3 over this game, and I could see the argument for it, definitely. Just personally, I got more invested in this one compared to 3. 3 also made the list, for those of you who don't know. It's on one of the lower ones, but this one makes it a little higher for me. So I'll first touch on what Far Cry series is. It's a first-person shooter series. Basically how these games work is you get dropped in from some sort of event, and then you figure out where you're going is kind of away from the rest of civilization. There's a dictator or kind of rebel leader that's evil and has a bunch of allies for him that cover different regions across a big sprawling map. And then you join the resistance or whatever the good guy group is, and then you help develop and help them capture the entirety of the map, take out all those allies in their own little sub-stories for each area. And then once those sub-stories are completed, they kind of connect over into the overarching story, and then eventually after you complete all those sub-stories, the game moves on to where you have kill the main bad guy. You go do that, capture the whole thing, you're done the game. And even though every game follows that same format, at least from Far Cry 3 up, I've never played 2 or 1, so I can't really talk on them. But it doesn't get boring. As much as it is repetitive, and as much as I played as many as them as possible, I played all of them past 3 besides Primal, so how many ever that is, I think it's like 5. I've never really found getting tired of the Far Cry experience. And what these games do so well is the combat and the customization. So you have so many different guns to pick from. You can modify them different ways. You can create your own little builds. You can go for, what I like to do is I like to take one stealthy option, so I usually go for the bow or something like that, so I can just pick off people with the bow silently, and then have like an AK or something like that to go loud. So there's always those different playstyle options that these games do so well. And what this game did for me in the Far Cry series compared to all the other ones, I really fell in love with the antagonist and the kind of twisted atmosphere this game gives you. So specifically in this game, you're fighting a church kind of cult. The main guy's name is Joseph Seed, if I'm correct, which I'm pretty sure I am. He controls this big massive area and kind of leads this cult so he can control the power through religion. And it's basically a whole bunch of twisted takes on the extreme end of extreme fanatic religious beliefs put into a game, and then creating a bad guy out of it. It's really interesting. I love the atmosphere of the game. I love the little allies you can get in this game specifically. And overall, in my opinion, this was just the Far Cry game that stuck to me the most. Far Cry 3 is definitely a close second, and it's clearly these 2 are the best games in the series in my opinion. But I personally give the edge to Far Cry 5. Alright, so next up, this will probably be the first game that not a lot of people know about in this video, and that is NBA Ballers. This is a PS2 era game. I think it's also on the original Xbox as well. It could be on the GameCube, I'm not 100% on that. But what this game is, it's a arcadey basketball game. And for those of you who haven't watched my channel too much, I'm a huge arcadey sports game fan. I think it's one of the best genres out there to just pick up and play and have some good fun with. And in my opinion, this will come as kind of a controversial take for those who love the genre. This is the best arcadey basketball game out there. What this game is, it's basically a mix of kind of a simulation style basketball game in terms of the look, the outfits of the characters, the courts, how the ball moves and stuff like that. That part's more simulation style, but the actual gameplay, the movement, the abilities, and the interactions in the game are super Arcadian out there. So it's a good blend of both styles of games. It also, instead of having a team element to it, it's one-on-ones or one-on-one-on-ones. So you're playing by yourself, and it adds that more street style of you're just pulling up to the park, somebody wants to run ones or something like that. And what's so cool about this game is it gets all the actual NBA players, puts them in kind of their street style versions, and you can do these crazy cool flashy moves. You can get these moves where you dribble it off the ground for your legs and stuff like that while they stand in front, like confusing them. You can pass to characters you have out of bounds to kind of do alley-oops from the crowd. You can self alley-oop off the backboards. There's still hot spots like in an NBA Jam game, so you can have like a hot spot corner 3. You can do these specific modes where your goal is to build up enough kind of boost or like your turbo bar, and then once you fill that up, you can tear down the whole net, and that's how you win the game, by being the first to break the net. And to me, what made this game stand out to me so much compared to other games in the genre is the feel of the gameplay. It's very slick, it's very smooth. You feel like you're just doing super flashy stuff, and it looks so cool. And especially as somebody who's like played basketball before, I played it for years. Seeing all these moves kind of flow together, it looks really good. It feels good. Every time you get the ball, you just feel like you can do something super flashy and super fun no matter what. And there's a great amount of content in this game. You can create your characters. I think you can have up to 10 or 7 characters. You can fully create their attributes by leveling up through gold you get throughout the game. You can level up each individual stat. You can get them different badges, which will have like hotspot, or you steal easier or something like that. It'll have like different built-in powers. You can also have your character have a girlfriend that stands on the sideline. You can have a friend that's stands on the sideline. You can pass to him. You can have a car that will show up in the background wherever you go. That will show off whatever car you have, and you can customize the look of the character completely, adding a bunch of different chains or tattoos or having your whole outfit. And there's a bunch of legendary characters you can unlock. So there's so much time you can put into this game, unlocking and playing with new content. Just a great arcadey sports game, in my opinion, one of the best out there, and that's why it makes the list for me. Alright, so coming up next is number 51, and that is Hitman 3. This is actually a series that I only got into from this game. So I originally knew about Hitman. My dad was a big fan of Hitman, and that's how I learned about the series. My brother eventually ended up picking it up, and I was watching him play some of the newer ones, and I was like, oh, these are pretty detailed, it looks cool. Looks like there's a little bit of replayability by doing different endings to each mission, and it's kind of open-ended and figuring out how you want to do each mission. So I was like, oh, that seems fun. So I picked up this the second I got the PS5. I think it was the second game I bought, and I ended up falling in love with the game. So this is going to include Hitman 3 and Hitman 2 and Hitman 1. I'm kind of including them all in one big glob here because they're really just map pack add-ons because they play exactly the same throughout all of them. But for those of you who don't know about the series, Hitman is a stealth assassin game. So you play as this guy. Normally in stealth games like Splinter Cell, Assassin's Creed, Dishonored, for those of you who play those, your goal is to stay out of sight and kind of stealth your way through the shadows, avoid groups of crowded people, and just try to get to your target unnoticed, kill them, or do whatever, steal something or whatever, and then escape without being seen. What these games do is they switch that up by, you want to stay hidden, you want to stay unnoticed, but how he does it is he works his way through by disguising himself as people and taking their place in the atmosphere or area that you're going to. So say you're playing at a party and there's bartenders behind the bar. You would go behind the bar, either find extra clothes that were there in like the lockers, or you could take out and subdue a bartender, take his clothes, and assume the place is him in kind of the workplace. And that's how you work your way through different disguises in order to get to the main guy, get rid of him, then go back through all your different disguises, and then escape the level. And what these games do so well is it's up to you how you want to approach it. So you'll load up a map, they'll have kind of points you can follow if you're playing on the lower difficulties, where it will kind of show you the different kind of main story paths you can go that all end up leading to either killing the target, one of the sub-targets, or doing a side objective. Or you can do what I do, which is you play on the highest difficulty. It gives you no hints besides the ones you hear or directly find about in the game, and you have to work your way to figure out how you would advance each little story thing to get farther through the game or that map in order to end up killing your target. Or you can find a creative way of just going through without doing any disguises, not being seen, killing the target in some fun way, and then escaping. So there's so many different ways, so many different paths you can take to complete each mission. There's not a lot of individual missions, but the missions are so spread out and so massive that it feels like there's a ton of content in these games, and that's why I enjoy them so much. Alright, next up is Blazblue Continuum Shift Extended. I personally own this on the Vita, and this is a 2D fighting game. It's one of those 2D fighting games where it's a 2D style sprite in terms of the artwork and how the characters look, and then it's a 2D, it's on a single plane fighting game, so it's not a entire 3D circle, kind of like Dead or Alive or the Soul Calibur games. It's more of like a Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom or Mortal Kombat style of game. And in my opinion, this is probably one of the best fighters I've played, and specifically on the Vita, it was the one I had the most fun with. I actually got really into the multiplayer of this game, and why this one makes it so high on the list. It's one of the first fighting games that I actually love the characters' uniqueness and the combat so much that I ended up actually getting pretty good at this game at some point, and ended up playing ranked a lot, getting into lobbies with some high tier players, and just ended up knowing people within the community and just playing lobbies and lobbies and lobbies and just having fun with the game. Each character, for their appearance, their kit in terms of their movesets, are so different than I've found in any other fighting game. So, you know, in most fighting games, like Mortal Kombat, we'll take for an example, there's Scorpion, Sub-Zero, blah, 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 all the other ninjas, and then there's the big guys who play kind of similar. There's different versions of certain characters, like Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter, that play almost identical. There's none of that in this game. Each character has such a unique play style, abilities, weapon, and each time you pick up a new character and start playing them, it feels like you have to relearn part of the game all over again, which on the downside makes the roster pretty small compared to other fighting games, but you're not getting those duplicate characters, so the fighting roster feels honestly bigger because each character is just so different. They also have a pretty big story. If you like a lot of reading and a very complex story and tons of reading and tons of character growth and stuff like that, you'll really enjoy that. I personally didn't get into the story of this game. What I played was either online or the arcade mode, which was actually pretty good and fleshed out in this game, and I provided little story quips through the actual arcade and had an ending for each character, which I really enjoy. But why this game makes this list for me is because I just fell in love with the multiplayer for this game and the combat and how good the sprites and the music sound, and this game just runs beautifully on the PS Vita, and I just really fell in love with playing this game. Alright, so coming in at number 49, it's Saints Row the Third. For those of you who don't know what Saints Row is, it is a kind of GTA style game where it's a big open world sandbox game, third person shooter, and specifically in these games you are the leader of a gang known as the Saints. It's in that GTA element where a lot of the fun and gameplay you'll get out of these games is just messing around, going around, killing other gang members, finding fun weapons, or just kind of hack and slash around, driving cars off of cliffs, skydiving, taking helicopters and ramming them into other helicopters, and just doing fun, stupid stuff. That was a lot of the part of these games, and they kind of embrace it a lot in these games. What I mean by that is, even in the story, the sub-stories, the side missions, the side like little arcade mini games you can play, everything in these games is so over the top, and for less of words, it's silly. It's basically silly Grand Theft Auto is how I would describe this game. It's basically, it has a seriousness of some of the tones in terms of the story and some of the character parts and some of the deaths in the game, the overarching darker tones of kind of like gang violence and stuff like that. But then it takes a really silly spin on that, where it's just, you're this leader of this gang, you run around with flashy stuff. Like at one point you're wrestling this lucha libre who leads one of the gangs that all dress up in lucha libre outfits as they go to shoot you, and there's these techie ones that look like they're from the movie Tron, and you end up riding Tron bikes in the game, and that's what's so good about it. It's like organized chaos in a game. The whole entire thing felt like a goofy fun playthrough. I just felt like every time I would go to pick up the controller, I knew I was just going to have a fun time. There's so many different varieties in terms of gameplay, mini games, and they all feel fresh if you just spread them out decently and you kind of mix up which ones you want to do. You can keep the game fresh for the entire time. The story's actually pretty fun and funny. There's some good jokes in the story. The characters are really well done. and it kind of flows together really well. It's like playing a really good comedy movie, an action comedy movie is how I would describe it. Alright, next up we got Elder Scrolls Oblivion. So this is the game that came before Skyrim, and for those of you who don't know about this series, it is a fantasy role-playing game, and they're games that really focus heavy on self-character development through like abilities and powers and passive abilities while completing a ton of different storylines across this vast open map. And what these games do so well is, as I said, there's a giant open map. There's so many different little side quests, little main story quest lines that continue into branch into these huge quest lines that you can find just going to each city, going to each little tavern, going just exploring. You can find so many different quests that change in variety of how hard they are, if they're, I don't know, like a goofy little side quest, or there's these hardcore darker stories, or they tie into the main quest or one of the main sub-story quests that have these huge branching stories. There's just so much content in these games, and it's really well done. And specifically this one is the edition that comes with all the DLC, and the DLC in this game is fantastic, especially the Shivering Isles DLC. It gives you a whole another island that you can explore, and has this really cool story where you play kind of as a servant or helper to a Daedric Lord, which is kind of like a demon lord in these type of games. So there's always a great variety in these stories, and they're all usually really well done. Specifically in this game, the Dark Brotherhood, in my opinion, is the best quest line in this game. Specifically for me, the one where you play in the house, and it's almost like a murder mystery, but you're the killer and you have to kill them all without them figuring out that you're the one killing them. And specifically what this game does that Skyrim doesn't do, that I really appreciate, is it doesn't allow you to go a jack of all trades. What that means is, like, you can have basically super high levels in basically everything. Your character doesn't feel unique compared to all the other characters you can make, and it kind of cuts the replayability of the game in half. This game doesn't allow you to do that as much, so you can create kind of more unique builds each playthrough, so it has a ton of replayability. So this game was just a fantastic playthrough, so much content, and just always fun to explore these games. Alright, so next up is another RPG. This is Knights of the Old Republic. Fantastic Star Wars RPG from back in the original Xbox era. And if you remember earlier in the video, I talked about Dragon Age. This is from the same developer as BioWare, and is one of their earlier titles. It has those same character development traits and overarching huge story with a bunch of different sub-stories and choices you can make in terms of if you want to be completely evil or completely good, and your characters that you bring along with you interact with different choices no matter which ones you make in different ways. So there's so much replayability on the characters and the content you'll be getting in these games. What steps this game up for me in terms of the gameplay and story is first the gameplay. It's fun and challenging, I think. I think it's definitely more challenging than Dragon Age 2, and I had a lot of fun with it. So this game follows kind of the Dragon Age Origin style of gameplay, which really Dragon Age Origin follows this style of gameplay, but just as a reference. It's basically where you can kind of move to set up your positioning in kind of almost real time, and then you pick an ability that you want your character to cast, and it will kind of auto lock them into an animation and a certain time frame for the animation to come out. It does the ability, then you can pre-select the next one, so you can kind of string up abilities, and it will go through on their certain time frames to cast those abilities in this time. So it's kind of like real-time turn-based combat is how I like to describe it. And what I love so much about this game is Star Wars is one of those first things, and continues to be one of those things, that I love the universe so much. I'm so interested in all the different characters, the powers, the different lightsabers, what they mean, type of thing. It's one of those ones where I first just started loving everything about the universe and started interacting with all the different media, from the movies to games. Comics I don't really buy because it's another thing I would have to collect and spend money on, but I look at people's opinions on the comics and go through some of the stories on like people's YouTube channels or stuff like that. But That saying, I really enjoyed the story and the universe Star Wars is set up in. So just being able to play an RPG in that is fantastic. And this is a really good one at that. Alright, next up is The Last of Us. For those of you who don't know about these games, I mean, most PS3 and PS4 and PS5 owners know about these games, is they're survival, stealth, zombie apocalypse games, but very story driven. So what these games are is it's kind of a combination of stealth and third-person action combat. One of the main draws to these games is you have to conserve and scavenge around and look for all the stuff and equipment you're going to need to survive the entire story. So it really nails that atmosphere of an actual zombie apocalypse situation where you would be like scouring for useful resources, opening up cupboards, drawers, stuff like that, trying to find little scraps and stuff that you can use to create useful stuff that you'll be using throughout the game. The combat is pretty well done. Nothing groundbreaking or fantastic in the third-person genre, but it's really well done. What this game does well, and why everybody raves about this game being so good, and why it makes my list this high, is the story and the character interactions. So you play as Joel. He's the full-grown adult dude you're seeing. And you have Ellie, who's the kid you're seeing, and you go through this. This is one of those games I don't want to spoil anything about the story, because I find it's one where the story and the characters carry this game so immensely, and is the reason why this game's talked about so much. And it's one of those games you purely got to go into blind in order to enjoy it as much as everybody else does. So I'm not going to touch too much on it. Basically, you're trying to get her from point A to point B, and you're protecting her, and she kind of grows alongside you. First off, you're like, oh, this kid's going to be annoying, she's going to get in my way, I have to try to get to this place with her, she's going to be a pain in the ass. Then you end up liking her, she has a lot of useful abilities, and you kind of see the characters grow together, and it has this really nice overarching story that starts off small, and each area grows bigger and bigger and bigger to the grand finale. It's really well done. It almost feels like a really well done movie is what you're playing through. Alright, so next up is Deus Ex Human Revolution. For those of you who've watched all the other videos, you would know the other game on the PS4 makes this list as well. In my opinion, this is the better out of the two. What these games are, for the people who don't know about them, is they're first-person stealth or first-person shooting games. So it's one of those games, kind of like Dishonored or Assassin's Creed, where the stealth option is kind of always that main starting option. They always give you that option to play stealthy, but really if you want to, you can run in there and just open run and gun most of the game and actually have decent combat mechanics and cover and abilities and enough ammo to really have it just feel like a cover shooter throughout the entire game if you wanted to. Really, you can focus your abilities and your upgrades to your playstyles. It has the same thing in the Fallout games, where you can create your persuasion as well, or your charisma, or different passive stats that more affect the character you're playing as himself, which is Jensen, and you can unlock different dialogue options, different routes that would not normally be accessible if you didn't have those upgrades. So each playthrough will feel slightly unique. And as I said, story-wise, you're playing as a guy named Jensen. It's basically this cyberpunky, noir, like dark story. He's basically a leader of a security team. He's like a high-ranking officer of special ops kind of guy. Initially, at the very beginning, your lab gets overrun, you almost die, but basically this thing in the story and what everybody's fighting over in this game is basically these corporations have developed augments for humans that allow them to be kind of almost like super sentinel robot humans. So you can have like eye stuff that allows you to zoom in or see out or see night vision. You can enhance your arms, adding like robot prosthetics and stuff like that basically allow you to have super strength or allow you to turn invisible completely. So there's so many different augments that are created in this world which give each person unique powers. And then Jensen gets fitted with a bunch of them so he can survive this attack that he went through. And then basically you're a special ops super soldier. You're basically sent on this mission to figure out who attacked your company in the lab and figure out like what they're after, what their motives are, and how to deal with them. And then it has a bunch of different overarching sub-stories, side quests, and characters that all interact with that main story. What these games do so well is the kind of dark atmosphere, and the atmosphere of the world and city you're working in is fantastic. Jensen himself is a badass and super cool and really fun to play as. The option to just switch it up and be like, I don't really want to play this mission stealthy, I'll just run and gun and shoot. Or I've been playing most of the game running gun, might as well challenge myself with a stealth mission. And having that option to play two distinct play styles and swap them out interchangeably is fantastic, and really makes this game so it never gets stale throughout the entire thing, even though the story is so good that it won't feel stale throughout playing it. If you haven't played this, highly recommend it, and that's why it makes my list. Alright, next up is Simpsons Hit and Run. This is one of the best TV or movie adaptations into games that's ever been done. But what this game is, it's a Simpsons game that is kind of like almost a Simpsons version of GTA. The main playstyle of this game is it's a driver racer. So basically all missions rely around taking your car and driving or racing somebody or collecting a bunch of stuff or smashing a certain car. It's all driven around vehicles, but you can get out of your vehicle, you can walk around, you can kick people, you can do whatever, kind of like a GTA game. And as I said with South Park, what this game does so well is it nails the atmosphere, the look, the characters, the comedy style of a Simpsons game so well. It's not to the point of South Park due to the era and kind of the limitations technology-wise, in terms of it looks exactly and sounds exactly like a Simpsons game or TV show, but it does it well enough for the era, and fantastic for the era actually. The comedy and the jokes and the characters hit exactly like the show, and that's what to me is the most important part of it. Also, the drive mechanics are fun. Every car you get into is like a super vehicle where you can just kind of bounce other vehicles out of the way. The racing's fun. There's different varieties of missions, as I said, that kind of keep it fresh throughout the entire thing. But through the story, you'll be playing as each different character throughout The Simpsons, or like the main characters, through their different areas. So each character is kind of assigned to a hub area that they drive through, and all your collected characters and outfits and cars are saved through each area, so you can access all the cars you had for each character, and then you go through, complete each of their stories, which kind of then tie into the overarching plot, and then you beat the game. The gameplay elements and the fun kind of atmosphere and just the mess around kind of GTA style of these games offers is entertaining enough that even a non-Simpsons fan, I think, would really enjoy these games. That's why it makes my list. Alright, so coming up next is WWE Smackdown Vs Raw 2008. The gameplay you are seeing, because the PSP always a substitute, is very close. Substitute is 2009 WWE Smackdown Vs Raw, so the gameplay is basically identical, just looks a little different, and there's different characters because of the roster changes. For a little context to why this makes my list, back in the day when I was in elementary school, I was huge into WWE. I had a friend that was huge into WWE as well. We would go over or hang out with each other on the days that either SmackDown was on or Raw, practice wrestling moves on trampolines, stuff like that. So there's a lot of nostalgia factor for me for these games. But besides the nostalgia factor, this game's actually fantastic in terms of the gameplay. So what the WWE games are, it's a wrestling game. If you played any wrestling game or Def Jam Vendetta, it plays very similar to these games. Where it's kind of a fighting game, where it's kind of a over the top, or kind of like, I don't know, not super over the top, but kind of angled up top camera view, and you play in the ring like a normal WWE event, and it's basically, you have your grab, you have your kicks and punches. Kicks and punches will counter a grab if it's before the grab. If you're blocking for a punch or something like that, you can grab and that will counter the block. You can also, specifically in these games, you can counter a grab. So if you're blocking but you switch to the counter grab button, you'll counter the grab and flip them off of you basically. So it's a little more in-depth than current WWE games, where basically all the reversals are done with one trigger, and it's just basically how good you are at timing the one trigger. Basically any match style you can find in the history of WWE most likely is included in this game. It has the current roster in this game that I grew up on, so this is prime. All the wrestlers I knew and loved back then are on this game, because this is at the height of my WWE fandom. These games are such pickup, fun play games where you can pick them up, load up some of your favorite characters of all time, some legends, some new characters, basically have them match up, throw them in a Royal Rumble, throw them in a tag team match, and just have fun playing it. So the nostalgia and just how fun these games are is really why I love these games. Alright, so next up is a game I actually talked about on my hidden gems list, and that is the Darkness 2. In my opinion, one of the best first-person shooters on the console, and for a console that actually, in my opinion, is loaded with quality first-person shooters. What this game does compared to other first-person shooters is, one, the combat's actually really well done, but the jump in terms of combat quality and how smooth the game feels is insane from the first to second one. The combat in this game is really fun. It mixes just regular shooting, you can akimbo weapons, you can have powers, which I'll talk about more in a second, and there's a bunch of different combinations you can do to kind of find your own little fun play style. What this game does so uniquely compared to other shooters, though, is the story and the powers associated with the story. So basically you play as, I'm pretty sure his name's Jackie, but he's a ex-mob member that I'm pretty sure he's the son of one of the bosses that had a hit taken out on him. And basically his family's kind of crumbling apart, mixed with rivals, and his old family's trying to hunt him down. So it's all mixed in with that mafia business. And while that mafia stuff is going on, you also have the other storyline, which kind of ties directly into it, where Jackie is slowly getting possessed by a demon, and the demon has offered Jackie demon powers, or powers that he can use in the mortal world, get revenge for his father, and kind of slay all of his enemies type thing. But it comes at a cost of Jackie's sanity and his soul possibly. So it does well of creating an interesting story, balancing all these elements together. And it's definitely one of those games that has a super dark undertone and story to it. So the powers that he gives you create a bunch of different play styles, options you can make. You can have little minions that you summon that will help you fight. You can have these arms that like slice through people. You can harvest people's hearts and stuff like that, which will give you health and heal you. And this is one of those games that I don't want to spoil too much of the gameplay and stuff like that, because I think it's one that you go in blind, you learn the powers, and you just have such a great experience going through this dark and great story that I would highly recommend going in blind playing this one. Alright, coming in at number 41 is Crash Tag Team Racing. This is a fantastic, unique racer for the console. It's a kart racer that takes place in the Crash Bandicoot universe. So what this game does specifically compared to other kart racers is it adds the element of, you can kind of, as you're racing, you all race solo, and as you're racing you can press a merge button, and if you run into another opponent you can merge together and create like a super vehicle that one person is a gunner up top and can shoot all the abilities and all the power-ups that are picked up, they control and shoot at people while the other person drives. So it adds that unique element to the game that's a lot of fun. It also has like a Twisted Metal battle mode where you automatically spawn in as two people and you basically go around this arena trying to rack up as many kills as possible. Whoever gets the most amount of kills at the end wins. And it has this cool story mode where you play kind of like Crash Bandicoot, where it's kind of a platformer to get to the areas where the races are, and then you do the races, either the arena battle ones or the actual races, and that advances the story. And you can collect coins throughout the platforming part that you can spend on cars, characters, and customization perks to kind of change your vehicles that you can use in the actual story races. So it's unique in that it combines the gameplay elements and kind of the searching and looting of a platformer with the racing of a racer. The character designs are really well done. Every character plays pretty similar, with each character just having their unique turret weapon. So it's fun finding whatever character that you find their car and character elements the best. It's really just appearance and which turret you like the best, but it's fun playing with the different characters nonetheless. There's a lot to unlock, a lot of content. Split screen runs great on the Xbox, so if you have a friend, this is a great couch 2-player game. Alright, and finally, the end of the video, the last one, and that is coming at number 40, which is AMP3. For those of you who don't know about this game, the AMP series is a snowboarding game that I think originally started on the original Xbox, if I'm not mistaken. And basically what these games are is originally started off as more as a simulation style of game, with AMP1 and AMP2 being very simulation and realistic in terms of the combos and how you move and the gameplay elements. Whereas this one, they said, screw that, we're not doing that anymore, and basically kept the fundamentals of how you move and stuff. It still feels similar to AMP2, but basically said, we're gonna go out in left field with the story and all the other gameplay elements. So what AMP3 is a very over-the-top arcadey snowboarding game, and as somebody who's a big fan of the SSX games, and honestly holds SSX as one of my favorite franchises of all time in terms of games, this game actually beats out a lot of SSX games in terms of how good I think it is. It has a overarching story mode. It's not like SSX where you have kind of your story is basically just collecting medals and going through different mountains or areas or races and collecting the different medals and slopestyle and races. But in this one, it's actually a story. So you go through different mountains, completing this way over the top, super wacky story that has a bunch of characters that are just over the top. It's basically playing like one of those stupid cheesy movies like a Napoleon Dynamite, a Spaceballs, that's just stupid cheesy in a good way and does it really well. It's playing one of those, but with some really good arcadey snowboarding game play beside it. So each mountain has a bunch of different objectives to do. You kind of increase your renown on each mountain, and then it allows you to access and continue the story. So you do all these different missions, which are either earn a certain amount of points, doing certain style of tricks, impress sponsors. There's ones where they line up like bowling pins and stuff like that, and you have to do as much damage as crashing off of like sofas that you're rolling down the hill on or something like that. So there's a bunch of different weird and over-the-top mini game kind of style of challenges that you have to do throughout the game. You have a fully customizable and created character that you play the story through. And what these games add compared to other games, it's very similar to SSX on Tour, I'm pretty sure, where it adds a slow motion element. So what these games do, you have your regular tricks, and then you have this thing called flow, I'm pretty sure what it's called in the game. But basically, if you don't fully rotate but half rotate all your tricks, you'll go into a slow motion version of the trick, and it will rack up more points doing a slow motion kind of more stylish-y version of a trick. So you can combine those and combo those together with the manuals, and that's how you get your big scores. So it kind of makes it a little different compared to other arcadey snowboarding games out there. The riding and all that's really smooth, and honestly the gameplay and just how fun it is to go through the story with really solid gameplay is really why this game makes this list so high. Alright, and there you have it. I really appreciate anybody who stuck through the entire video. Even if you just skipped through it, I really appreciate you giving the content a view. As always, thanks for watching, and remember, everybody has some nerdiness at their core.